Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship by Venture for Canada. Venture for Canada is a national charity on a mission to foster the entrepreneurial skills and mindsets of young Canadians. Our vision is a Canada where young people can equitably realize their entrepreneurial potential to help build one of the most prosperous entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world.
Meet Ian Brooks, CEO of HelloFresh Canada, a pioneer in the meal kit industry. Embarking on an unconventional career path, Ian transitioned from environmental sciences to revolutionize the way we approach meal preparation. His journey includes diverse experiences in environmental consulting, technology project management, and strategic roles at Johnson & Johnson and McKinsey and Company. At HelloFresh, Ian has been instrumental in transforming meal preparation through innovative, eco friendly meal kits, significantly reducing food waste and carbon footprint compared to traditional grocery shopping. He discusses the challenges and triumphs of introducing HelloFresh to Canada, emphasizing the brand's commitment to sustainability and healthy eating. This episode is a deep dive into the evolving landscape of the meal kit industry, offering valuable insights for entrepreneurs, environmental enthusiasts, and anyone interested in the intersection of food, technology, and sustainability. I am very excited to have Ian Brooks on the Venture for Canada podcast, A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. And Ian is the head of HelloFresh in Canada. And I think Ian has such a wealth of knowledge from his experience over the last 7+ years in the meal kit industry. And I'm really excited to dive into understanding the fundamentals of this high growth sector with him. Ian, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So first, to get things kicked off, Ian, can you describe at a high level your career journey to founding HelloFresh in Canada?
Sure. My career journey is unorthodox, I think is the first thing I would say. So I started out in the world. I did an undergraduate degree in environmental sciences and life sciences. And I think like a lot of people in the 90s, I was pretty convinced I was going to go save the whales. And so anyway, I got out of university and then I realized there were not very many jobs saving the whales. So instead I got a job as an environmental consultant in Calgary. I worked for oil patch and utility clients for almost 3 years doing that. It was as far from the whales and also from the saving of them as I could imagine. And I learned a ton. I loved the people I worked with. But it definitely wasn't the job that I think I saw myself doing long term. From there, I moved to Toronto. I got a job working at a bank. Did that for 4 years. I was in the sort of technology project management side of this bank, and that was a really neat job for me because it was a bunch of stuff I didn't know, but I really found interesting. So the tech side of the business project management, and then eventually built out a reporting function for that bank. So building something that allowed them to manage their technology projects as a portfolio of collected projects rather than as individual projects. So thinking beyond one project and thinking about the whole and making that whole bigger than the sum of its parts. So I did that for about 4 years. I took a year off. I went and did an MBA at a school called IMD in Switzerland. It was a 1-year program. It was a phenomenal school, case-based, very intensive, small school. Really loved it. Turned out, however, 2008 was not the right year to do an MBA or be out of the workforce because trying to get a job at the end of 2008 was a bit of a struggle. I got lucky. I ended up with a great job working for Johnson & Johnson in Switzerland in a strategic sourcing role. Worked with them, 3 roles in 2 countries over 3 years, doing a bunch of stuff, both with pharmaceutical manufacturers, and then later on working with marketing service providers, working with sourcing of consultancy and labor contracts and that sort of stuff. Moved with J&J from Switzerland to London. After I'd been in London for a while, I ended up joining McKinsey and Company, worked with McKinsey for 4 years, the first 2 in London and then the next 2 back in Toronto. So I sort of completed my professional and personal journey through Europe back to Toronto. And it was in Toronto in 2015 that I started talking with HelloFresh. And that translated ultimately to an opportunity with them.
Awesome. That is a very interesting career journey. And one of the things we like to talk about at Venture for Canada is that careers are very nonlinear and they can often go in
Yeah,
unpredictable directions. And your career is a great example of that.
100%.
So, Ian, can you zoom in a little bit to the early days of HelloFresh in Canada? What were the first, let's say, like 2 years of the first 2 years of HelloFresh's inception in Canada like?
So we started the business at the beginning of 2016, right? And we soft launched. The plan was to soft launch roughly 12 weeks after I started. And that was indeed what we did. So I started in February. We soft launched in May of that year, just in Southern Ontario. We went to a public launch. We did 5 weeks of friends and family to learn a little bit around what we were doing from a product perspective and what we were doing in terms of actually assembling meal kits themselves and getting them delivered to folks. So we had 5 weeks of that. We launched to the public in June of 2016. I think we had a staff by that point of about 10 people, and we were working with a company in Mississauga who did ready-made sandwiches, and they had great folks who understood food who could help us actually pack the boxes. So they helped us out with space and with available hands in order to pack boxes, and that's how we really got our start. It was pretty neat right up front because we could see, and we spent a lot of time actually through, especially the summer of 2016, going to every neighborhood festival, party, parade, whatever you could think of, any opportunity to go talk to people who might become customers, explain the business, explain the offering, and learn what they thought of it. And I would say nothing taught me more about what the potential, but also the challenges of meal kits might be for Canadians than that summer of basically speaking to customers almost all summer long. One of the neat things that we were able to do, I think shortly thereafter, we started to see that we were getting traction with the business through the fall, not hugely, but talking about moving from tens of deliveries to hundreds of deliveries through that fall, and we knew that we wanted to build a national business. We also knew that we couldn't do that in Canada just from Southern Ontario. And in order to make that work, then we needed to open up some sort of presence in Western Canada. And that was a challenge to do, absolutely. But we wanted to do it quickly rather than slowly. And so we talk about sort of growing into those first 2 years. It did follow. Wherever people were, they were interested. And it was a great, I think, driver for us in getting a Western production location stood up in Edmonton very quickly thereafter. So we were able to do that in Q1 of 2017. So just less than basically 9 months post-launch, we had a truly national operation. And from there, it was a matter of learning every week, focusing on delivery, focusing on learning, focusing on scaling. And off it went.
That sounds like a very busy year. It sounds like 2016, there would have been a lot of things going, and that's a ton of growth in a short period of time. On a personal level, how did you navigate that kind of hyper growth mode in leading the company through all of these kind of changes over the first year?
Well, good question. Well and not well at the same time, I would say. I mean, it became a bit of a running joke, not the happiest joke, but a running joke anyways between my partner and I, because one of the reasons that I left McKinsey and Company was to get more balance in my life, to get more work-life balance. And then, of course, I decided to start a hyper-growth startup instead, which is not the place where you get balance. And that's probably more about me and, drive and interest in doing tough things. But anyway, it was a challenge. I mean, the other sort of slightly ridiculous thing was that I picked a date on a calendar for my start date, and it was February 15th, 2016. And it ironically turned out that Monday that I started, which I had promised everyone I would start, was Family Day. And so here I am working on Family Day, my first day, starting this company. So anyways, it was, I was lucky in a way that I loved what I did. I was lucky that I had a partner who, she also had just come off of parental leave, of maternity leave with our second son, but had gone back to work as well. And so we both worked hard, and we both worked hard, but also then made time for our kids. And if that meant that, I was off the clock with work from say 6 o'clock until the kids were in bed at 8 o'clock, but then I needed to work from 8 till 10 or 8 till 11 at night to keep things going. That was what we did. And with the benefit of hindsight, it did work out. Was it easy? No. Am I glad in hindsight that I did it? Yeah, mostly. And we're still together, so there's that.
Awesome. And it would have been very busy in particular, I can imagine, because I think you had said your kids were like 8 and 10. So they would have been just like little, like an infant and a toddler basically at this time.
That's right, 1 and 3.
Yeah, that is a busy 2016 was a busy year, although I'm sure that the pandemic years and later years were also quite busy, which is a great segue to, can you walk us through a little bit of how HelloFresh navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, with obviously the context being the pandemic was a huge boon towards the meal kit industry, in the sense that I even know, like, my partner and I got HelloFresh meal kits during the pandemic. I feel like I know dozens of people who didn't use meal kits before, but then the pandemic hit and they're like, okay, yeah. Like, and then and many of them are obviously still using them to this day. So there was, I imagine, this massive surge of interest. How did you navigate HelloFresh through this pandemic, and obviously all of the challenges that existed, but also this massive surge in demand?
Yeah. The first thing I would say on this is a complicated subject. We could talk for hours on it. I'll try to pull out, I think, some of the bigger, I guess, learnings and observations and experiences that I had and that we had. I think that the first thing I would say is absolutely during the pandemic, it became clear, it became clear very early on that there were a large number of Canadians who were looking for alternatives to going to a grocery store. And absolutely, meal kits were a part of that. And we saw very strongly a move towards meal kits, both the HelloFresh brand and also the Chef's Plate brand that we operate. And that was not just Canada. That was in every country in which HelloFresh operated. So we knew that we had Canadians who wanted the safety of food delivered at home. They also wanted the quality that we had and the real ingredients and the meals they could cook with their family. It's an opportunity to bring people together. And at a time like that, we got a lot of comments from folks who were very, very grateful that we could do it. The flip side to that is that our business is a physical production business. This isn't a digital product where you click a button and you add 5 servers and you're done. This is a business of getting ingredients from growers and portioning them in the right way and packing them into bags and boxes and delivering them. And so we have a workforce, and this is also a time when you could see very quickly that doing the right thing for our workforce was going to be paramount to their safety above all else. But also then, if we can't keep our workforce safe and engaged and willing to come to work, we're not going to be able to meet the needs of Canadians who want us to give them that grocery delivery. So, and we were a bit lucky in this regard, I think, as well. HelloFresh is present in many markets, and one of the markets we were in was Germany, and Germany had an earlier experience with COVID than some other markets, some other countries. And so we as HelloFresh countries got together very early on, sort of in the pandemic, still in February, and we said, okay, what can we do as a company to keep our folks safe? Because that is clearly going to matter. And one of the things that we did really early on was we said, all right, we don't want to have an incentive for anyone to come to work if they're feeling sick. These are early days of COVID. We did not know how COVID particularly was spread, but we did know that we didn't want people who had COVID coming into our production locations and maybe giving it to their coworker, right? And so the obvious answer for us was to say, well, we should pay them to stay home. No questions asked. I'm going to ask you to fill out a questionnaire before you come to work. And part of that is, have you been in contact with somebody who is sick? Are you yourself starting to feel any, runny nose or anything like that? And if the answer is yes, we're going to pay you to stay home for 2 weeks. And it's not just our employees. Anybody who works in any one of our facilities, we're going to pay you to stay home as well. So that could be the sanitation crew. That could be the people who do the coffee service in the office. We want to make sure that none of you has a reason to come in if you're not feeling well. And I never really understood the argument that followed years and years onwards about should folks have paid sick leave, because obviously it's the right thing to do for them, and it becomes the right thing to do for the business, because you don't want a workforce that either can't work or won't come to work because they're afraid to. You want a workforce that's happy and engaged. And this for me was a big learning early on. We can do the right thing for our people, and it leads to a better outcome for our customers. And if we can do right by our people and right by our customers, we're probably doing right by the business as well. So that for me, I think, was a huge thing that we saw through COVID. We had been doing everything we could to do right by our people pre-pandemic, but this was, every week we tried to implement something in our production centers that would improve the well-being, improve the health and safety of our staff. And we made that a mantra as we went through the pandemic. I think that for me was a huge learning. So we actually changed some of the way that we presented meals to folks. It used to be pre-COVID and in the first, 8 weeks of the pandemic, when you signed up to HelloFresh in Canada, you chose a plan. You said, I'm a family, I'm going to have the family plan. Or I'm vegetarian, I'm going to have the vegetarian plan. Or, I'm, in this case, we called it a pronto plan. I'm interested in faster meals, I'm going to have a pronto plan. And if you were in one of those plans, those were the meals you saw. So we had, 10 meals for pronto customers and 6 meals for family customers, et cetera. But of course, people's needs shifted. Their appetite, what they were looking for changed. And so we said, well, we have these, at this point in time, I think it was about 25 different meals. We have 25 meals. Why don't we offer all 25 to any customer? Why don't we give them full choice? We could still say, we know you signed up for a family plan. Here are the family meals we'd recommend, but then here are the other 15 meals that you can also get if you'd prefer. And so going to full choice rather than a plan-specific architecture, we advanced that. We had been intending to do that, but it was kind of a year out in our roadmap. And we said, you know what? We've got so many people who want HelloFresh. Why don't we give them the best possible HelloFresh as quick as possible? So alongside doing everything we could to keep our folks safe in our production locations, we accelerated everything we possibly could off of our product roadmap to give our customers the best possible experience.
That's amazing, and so impressive that you were able to do that. One thing that comes to mind as well is you've been in this industry for close to 8 years, and you could have gone into many different sectors post McKinsey. What excites you about the meal kit industry? What motivates you to keep on doing this kind of work?
I talked at the beginning about my somewhat ridiculous career arc. I am still interested in saving the whales. And meal kits are a fascinating business for me personally, because the better we do as a company, the better the planet does. Meal kits reduce your carbon footprint by a third relative to grocery for the meals you eat with a meal kit. And that's because we have such a reduced food waste impact. There are all sorts of stats and studies and data around food waste through the predominantly grocery supply chain. And you'll see numbers like 33% or 37 or In some studies, up to 60% of food grown is ultimately wasted. Meal kits, we have waste that is like single digits, low single digits, versus easily 30, 40, 50% with alternatives. And that massive reduction in food waste leads to a massive reduction in CO2 relative to grocery. And I think we can all generally agree that the number one environmental problem the world is facing is global climate change driven by CO2 predominantly. And so for me, there's an opportunity here to drive a meaningful, lasting reduction in our carbon footprint while at the same time building an incredible business for our customers. It continues to be a huge source of motivation to me.
Yeah, and I think this is such an important point because, as you kind of alluded to, a lot of the times people think of meal kits and they think of all the packaging and they see the cardboard and various others, and they say, "Oh, this creates so much waste. I can't use a meal kit." But to your point, well, a few things. One is that a lot of that can be recycled in terms of like cardboard and various others, and two is that there's just so much food waste is such a big issue that I think the fixating on just the packaging is a little reductive.
I would tend to agree. And I find the subject of food waste is a challenging one. I can give the example of Toronto, where a couple of years ago, the city of Toronto decided to roll out new green bins, so curbside green bin for compostables. And the new green bins were twice as large, more or less, than the old green bins. So as a city, we all got implicit permission to waste twice as much food every week because the bin is twice as big. It's weird to think of, but that's what we did. We gave each other permission to waste twice as much food every week. So think about food waste. For me, food waste is an intergenerational morality issue. I think there's probably not a lot of arguments whereby we would say that there's infinite productive capacity in the world. At some point in time, when you farm land, in the way especially that we farm land these days, you degrade the quality of the soil, you degrade the presence of minerals and nutrients in the soil, and maybe you fertilize to maintain. Hopefully you do. But there is a finite limit to how much we can produce. And any pound of food that I produce today and waste today is a pound of food, I would argue, that some future generation will not be able to produce tomorrow. I'm literally stealing from the mouths of the future when I waste food today. And I'm going to mitigate that with better agricultural practices, with better fertilizer. But all of those then are like more energy inputs, more carbon into the atmosphere, et cetera. Food waste, we don't think about it. We don't see it. It's hidden from us by and large. The grocery stores don't put the dumpster full of rotten tomatoes in front of the store. They put it behind the store. With meal kits, you see the packaging. But I would like to frame that as packaging use versus food waste. Packaging we use is intentional. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. We work every day to try to reduce the amount of packaging we use because for us, it's cost and it's also waste. And we're a business that's built on low to no waste wherever we can. But packaging use allows us to reduce food waste. And then we say, okay, well, how can we minimize packaging use? And how can we minimize the impact of the packaging that we do choose to use? And we'll continue on that journey. But I agree with you. I think that as consumers, we get stuck sometimes on packaging and we miss the fact that, if I'm doing the other thing, if I'm in grocery shopping, I probably have a lot of food waste sitting in my fridge. I've got a bunch of cilantro that I'm never going to use. I think that's the big difference.
I'm reflecting on my refrigerator, and it's just my partner and I that live together, and the amount of food that we waste in terms of sometimes I'll go in and I'll be like, I won't clean the fridge out for like 2 weeks. And there's just all this stuff that has like accumulated that I end up having this garbage bag of waste that I just have to throw out. And to your point, it's a big issue, especially when you think it's magnified by like 40 million Canadians. So, given the rising kind of popularity of meal kits. And based on the research I did in this episode, there's varying projections that are done by different research firms. But a lot of the forecasts show that the meal kit industry will be growing like 15% year over year or plus in terms of like North America over the next like decade. Obviously, who knows? But a lot of the projections show that there's going to be pretty significant growth in meal kit demand. What do you think is driving that significant year-on-year growth in the overall sector?
Um, I think I think there are a lot of factors. I think one is, you think about just the underlying trend. I mean, e-commerce continues to grow, right? And we saw absolutely a surge in e-com during the pandemic. We've seen a bit of a retrenchment, particularly in what I would characterize as relatively low value adding e-commerce. So things where I'm substituting bricks and mortar channel for an e-com channel for a product that maybe I want to try on, or maybe I want to see, or I want to talk to an expert, et cetera. I think that a lot of that we've seen retrenchment in. I think when you get into what I would characterize as higher value add e-commerce products, and I would put meal kits in that space, I would also put like a lot of the ready to heat or ready to eat type foods, particularly if they have a certain value proposition in there, like the Factor brand. I think folks are seeing that value add in that product or service. And it's a product or service that by and large they can't get in bricks and mortar. So I think that we're going to see that underlying increase in penetration of e-com. I think the other thing we're seeing, which is super neat in the meal kits category, is that as the category gets more established, we are able to create offerings that are targeted at more parts of our market. So Chef's Plate for me is a great example of that in Canada. Chef's Plate is a meal kit brand that we acquired in Canada in 2018. We operate it as a standalone brand with standalone product and frankly, a relatively standalone customer base. So we have HelloFresh and we have Chef's Plate. And the neat thing about Chef's Plate is that we're able to bring a meal kit brand and product to market at a price point that is super attractive for a lot of people. That is a high value, everyday value product offering. And the recipes are great. The ingredients are great. But we find ways to bring it to market at a different price point. So I think part of the growth that we're going to see in the category is the ability to bring products to market that go after specific parts of the Canadian demographic of what Canadians want to eat. I think we're going to see continued growth in that space too.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating sector. And I can imagine there's like a lot of different directions that meal kit industry or meal kit companies can go in, like a lot of different kinds of paths, like even the potential for distribution through like grocery. Like there's a lot of different things that can imagine can happen. One thing that was interesting in preparing for this interview as well was doing just some research on HelloFresh itself, and it's a fascinating company founded in Germany that has become very global. I think as of today, it operates around 16 different countries. And the meal kit industry is also a very competitive one. There's a lot of companies that have like gone by the wayside and have ceased operations or have had a lot of public pressure and talked about their challenges. And it seems like HelloFresh has been really able to emerge as one of the like leading global players in the meal kit industry, even though there were a lot of initial kind of skeptics because the founders didn't have a huge amount of background in this space and were very young. The company has been really persistent and outlasted most of its competitors. What do you think is something that, what do you think are some of the ingredients of HelloFresh's success and its ability to persevere through some of the challenges in the broader meal kit industry?
That's a good question. Why us and why not others necessarily? Um, I think there are a lot of reasons. I would give you two. Um, the first I would say is that globally, we made the decision to invest in data early on and in a meaningful and rigorous way. And running a direct to consumer business, you have a direct relationship with your customer and they have an experience with your product and all aspects of the product and building a data infrastructure that allows you to understand what's working and what's not. And through that understanding, then to identify opportunities to improve, to get a little bit better every day. I think that choice to invest in data infrastructure and to invest in a continuous improvement mindset, I think that has been a huge source of differentiation for HelloFresh over time. To get 1% better at one thing every day, and to do that relentlessly for now in Canada more than 2,000 days in a row. It adds up. It really does add up. I think the second thing that I would call out is a relentless focus on execution. Simple strategy well executed is something that I say to my people a lot. Complex strategies are fun. Absolutely, they're fun. But we chose a simple strategy well executed because at the end of the day, what am I really doing? I'm bringing you dinner. I'm offering you that meal plan. And in order for you to rely upon HelloFresh, it's got to show up. It's got to have the right ingredients. They have to be of the right quality, with the right portion size, with the right recipe card and the right steps. So a relentless focus on execution in all things, small and large, every day and in every way. We talk a lot about every box matters. And that focus on execution over time, coupled with an infrastructure and an attitude and a mindset to growth and learning, has allowed us, I think, to be the best in our category on a sustained basis. I think we're only at the beginning. This is a young industry still. And when I look at the incredible, I think, growth that we've seen both pre-pandemic and through the pandemic and sustained post-pandemic in here. One of the things we say at HelloFresh is we're changing the way that people eat forever. And I really do believe that to be the case because we see it to be the case. We see it in the continued interest and actions of our customers. We see it in the stories we hear from people around how their teenagers have learned to cook from HelloFresh. We have customers now joining us as adults who write us notes into our customer care team to say, I got my first box today with my partner and I was super excited to see it. 6 years ago, when I was in high school, I learned to cook from HelloFresh. And I learned to cook and I learned to cook for my family. And I didn't know that I would love it, but I love it. And I love being able to follow a great recipe where I know I have everything I need. And I know that at the end, I'm going to put an amazing dinner on the table for my family. And that's how I learned. And that's what I love. I love the sharing that goes along with it. I love the meal that I get from it. And now I'm starting my own family and I'm bringing that with me to my own family. We are actually changing the way that people eat. We're bringing food back. We're bringing the cooking of food, of real food, back into the homes of so many Canadians. And I think we're going to continue to do that. I think we are only at the beginning, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's very much the early days of this industry, and meal kits probably really only emerged like close to a decade ago, or even like less. And it'll be very exciting to see how this industry evolves. I didn't know very much about meal kits before prepping for this interview and doing this interview, and it's been fascinating to learn more about this sector, and also thinking broadly about how meal kits could really influence in the future like how we as people like eat and consume food, right? Like that it has the potential to be, I think, so much bigger than it is today. And I'd still say that it's significant today, but I think the future of the meal kit industry is one to watch. So Ian, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a true pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our socials and through our email list. And be sure to subscribe to us in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss our next episode. Have feedback on today's episode? Let us know directly in the app. Thanks again for listening and for joining the new wave of entrepreneurs. Till next time.